The rhythmic clanking of metal against metal echoed through the small garage as the early morning sun filtered through the dusty windows. Jackson Carter wiped the sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of grease across his forehead. At 28, his hands already told the story of a lifetime of hard work. Calloused, scarred, and perpetually stained with motor oil that no amount of scrubbing could fully remove. "Jack," called a raspy voice from the small office tucked in the corner of East Side Auto Repair. "Mrs. Peterson's on the line about her Camry again." "Tell her I'll have it done by noon," Jackson replied, sliding out from underneath the ancient sedan he'd been working on since dawn. Detroit's industrial outskirts weren't glamorous, but they were home. This garage, once his father's pride and joy, now rested squarely on Jackson's shoulders. After Robert Carter's stroke 3 years ago, the responsibility of keeping the family business afloat while caring for his ailing father and supporting his 2 younger brothers had fallen to Jackson without question. "You're killing yourself." "Jack," said Marcus, his oldest friend and the garage's only other full-time employee, "when's the last time you took a day off?" Jackson shrugged, reaching for a rag to wipe his hands. "Can't remember, but Dad's medical bills won't pay themselves." The truth was, Jackson's life operated on a meticulously calibrated routine. Up at 5 a.m., open the garage by 6, work until 7 p.m., then head to the small 2-bedroom house where his father needed help with dinner and medication. His younger brothers, Michael, a community college student, and Devin, still in high school, did what they could, but the weight of financial responsibility was Jackson's alone. Despite the grueling schedule, Jackson found solace in the precision of his work and the satisfaction of fixing what others couldn't. The neighborhood knew him as reliable, honest, and fair, qualities that kept customers coming back despite the more modern facilities opening across town. "Are you still coming to my showcase tonight?" The voice, warm and hopeful, broke through Jackson's concentration as he bent over an engine. Lily Chen stood in the doorway, a vision in one of her own creations, a dress repurposed from vintage fabrics that somehow looked more elegant than anything in a department store window. At 26, she'd built a small but growing reputation for her sustainable fashion designs, creating beauty from what others discarded. Jackson's face softened into a rare smile. 8 o'clock, right? I'll be there." Their relationship had grown from a chance meeting when Lily's ancient Volkswagen had broken down outside his garage 2 years ago. What started as friendly conversations during oil changes had blossomed into something neither had expected, but both cherished deeply. They were kindred spirits, practical dreamers bound by ambition, integrity, and the shared experience of shouldering family responsibilities at young ages. "Don't forget to shower first," Lily teased, wrinkling her nose at his oil-stained coveralls. Jackson laughed and pulled her close, careful to keep his greasy hands from touching her dress. No promises. Their dreams were modest but shared. Jackson would expand the garage, maybe hire another mechanic to ease his workload. Lily would open her boutique, showcasing her upcycled designs. Together they'd build something sustainable, just like her fashion, a life crafted from hard work, honesty, and love. "I brought you lunch," Lily said, placing a paper bag on the workbench. "And I spoke to that real estate agent about the empty storefront next door." Jackson's eyes lit up. "What did they say?" "It's still out of our price range, but they hinted they might be flexible." Her eyes sparkled with cautious hope. "Just a few more months of saving, and maybe—" Jackson squeezed her hand. "We'll make it happen. Your designs deserve to be seen." The afternoon passed in a blur of oil changes, brake repairs, and diagnostics. Jackson was finishing up with the last customer of the day when the unexpected happened. The purr of a high-performance engine cut through the usual neighborhood sounds. Jackson looked up to see a sleek, midnight blue Aston Martin gliding to a stop outside the garage. The luxury car seemed completely out of place against the backdrop of weathered brick buildings and modest family sedans that typically lined this street. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out. Tall, poised, and immaculately dressed, in a tailored charcoal suit, she surveyed the garage with cool appraisal. Her auburn hair was swept into a sophisticated updo, and designer sunglasses obscured her eyes. Everything about her screamed wealth and influence, from her stance to the casual way she held a leather portfolio that probably cost more than Jackson's monthly rent. Marcus whispered from behind the counter, "Holy shit, is that Victoria Blackwood?" The name registered. Immediately. Victoria Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Industries, one of the largest tech and real estate development companies in the Midwest. Her face regularly appeared in business magazines and local news features about Detroit's economic revitalization. She removed her sunglasses, revealing sharp green eyes that missed nothing. "Is the owner available?" Her voice was smooth and authoritative, accustomed to immediate compliance. Jackson wiped his hands on his rag and stepped forward. "That would be me. Jackson Carter. How can I help you, Ms. Blackwood?" Her eyebrow arched, slightly perhaps surprised by his recognition or his youth. "My car is making an unusual noise. The dealership claims it needs to be sent back to the manufacturer, which would take weeks." She sounded annoyed at the inconvenience. "I was told you're something of a miracle worker with engines." Jackson approached the vehicle cautiously, aware of its value. "May I?" She nodded, and he popped the hood, revealing the pristine engine beneath. His experienced eyes scanned the components, his hands moving with practiced precision, despite the unfamiliar luxury beneath his fingertips. "It's the secondary belt tensioner," he said after a moment. "I can hear it when you accelerate. It's a minor issue, but it could damage the belt if left unaddressed." He straightened up. "I can fix it now if you'd like. Should take about an hour." Victoria checked her watch, a timepiece that likely cost more than everything Jackson owned combined. "That's significantly faster than the 3 weeks I was quoted elsewhere." She seemed both impressed and skeptical. "Go ahead." While Jackson worked, he felt Victoria's gaze following his movements. Unlike most clients who waited in the small reception area or left their vehicles, she stood nearby, observing with analytical interest. "You have remarkable hands," she commented unexpectedly. "Very precise movements. Where did you train?" "Right. Here," Jackson replied without looking up. "My father taught me everything I know." "No formal education?" "Some community college courses in automotive technology, but mostly hands-on experience." When he finished, Victoria tested the car, nodding with satisfaction at the smooth, silent operation. As Jackson wrote up the modest bill, she studied him with unnerving intensity. "Mr. Carter, I have several vintage cars in my collection that require specialized maintenance," she said, handing him a business card embossed with the Blackwood Industries logo. "I'd be interested in discussing a private arrangement." Before Jackson could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Where are you? Showcase starting soon." He glanced at the clock. 7:45 p.m. He'd lost track of time. "I appreciate the offer, Ms. Blackwood, but I need to close up now," he said, handing her the receipt. "Feel free to call to schedule another appointment if you need further service." Victoria seemed unaccustomed to dismissal, however polite. She slid her sunglasses back on, masking whatever reaction might have flickered across her face. "I will," she said, sliding into her car. "You can expect to hear from me again, Mr. Carter." As the Aston Martin purred away, Marcus whistled low. "Dude, do you realize who that was? And what she was offering?" Jackson was already grabbing his jacket and keys. "Someone who can get her car serviced anywhere in the city, but chose to slum it today. And now I'm late for Lily's showcase." As he locked up the garage and headed for his trusty old pickup truck, Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. A disruption to the carefully balanced life he'd constructed. But Lily was waiting, and tonight belonged to her dreams, not the unexpected attention of a woman from another world entirely. What Jackson couldn't know was that Victoria Blackwood rarely did anything without purpose, and her appearance at his humble garage was no coincidence. The wheels of change had been set in motion, and his life of quiet dignity and modest ambitions was about to be irrevocably altered. Lily's showcase was held in a repurposed warehouse in Eastern Market, the industrial space transformed by string lights and minimalist displays. showcasing her collection of upcycled fashion. Despite arriving late and slightly disheveled, Jackson felt a surge of pride as he watched her describe her sustainable design philosophy to an enthusiastic crowd of local boutique owners and fashion bloggers. "Each piece tells a story," Lily explained, gesturing to a jacket crafted from vintage denim and repurposed leather. "Fashion doesn't have to come at the expense of our planet." When her eyes found Jackson's across the room, her smile widened. He might not understand the intricacies of fashion, but he understood Lily's passion. The same focused dedication he brought to engines, she brought to fabric and design. Later, as they walked hand in hand through the market streets, Lily bubbled with excitement. "3 boutiques want to carry my pieces, Jack, and a sustainability blog wants to feature me next month." Jackson squeezed her hand. "I knew you'd blow them away." "What about you? How was your day?" she asked, leaning into his shoulder. He hesitated, unsure why he was reluctant to mention Victoria Blackwood's visit. "The usual, although I did work on an Aston Martin today." Lily raised her eyebrows. "In our neighborhood. Was it lost?" "Something like that," Jackson chuckled, steering the conversation back to her success. The next morning, Jackson arrived at the garage earlier than usual, hoping to catch up on paperwork before opening. He was surprised to find Victoria Blackwood waiting outside, leaning against a different luxury vehicle, a vintage Jaguar that made his mechanic's heart skip a beat. "Ms. Blackwood," he acknowledged, unlocking the garage. "We don't officially open until 6. "I'm aware," she replied smoothly, "but I thought we might speak privately about that arrangement I mentioned." Inside, Victoria's presence seemed to fill the modest space. She moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to controlling rooms much larger and more impressive than his small office. "I'll be direct, Mr. Carter. I've recently purchased several classic vehicles that require specialized care. My regular service center lacks the personal touch they deserve." She placed a folder on his desk. "I'm proposing to retain your services exclusively for my collection. The compensation would be significant." Jackson opened the folder and nearly choked at the figure on the proposal. It was more than triple his annual income from the garage. "This is generous," he said carefully, "but I have obligations here. This garage serves the community." Victoria studied him with those penetrating green eyes. "Admirable, but surely you could hire additional help to manage day-to-day operations while you focus on more valuable pursuits." Something in her tone made Jackson uneasy. "Why me specifically? There are specialists with fancier credentials." "I value skill and integrity over credentials," she replied. "And I've done my research on you, Mr. Carter. You've maintained this business while supporting your family through considerable hardship. That speaks to your character." The revelation that she'd investigated his personal circumstances was unsettling, but before Jackson could respond, his phone rang. The hospital. His father had experienced another episode and needed him immediately. "I have to go," he said, gathering his keys. "Family emergency." Victoria nodded, unexpectedly understanding. "Family comes first. We'll continue this discussion another time." Over the following weeks, Victoria's presence became a regular fixture at Eastside Auto Repair. She brought different vehicles from her collection, each magnificent in its own right, and lingered to watch Jackson work, engaging him in conversations that gradually extended beyond automobiles. Jackson learned that behind Victoria's polished exterior was a woman who had built her empire from the ground up after inheriting a struggling construction company from her father. Now 38, she controlled a vast network of businesses that were systematically redeveloping Detroit's abandoned industrial areas into modern commercial and residential spaces. "You're gentrifying neighborhoods people can't afford to live in anymore," Jackson pointed out one afternoon as he worked on her 1964 Corvette. Instead of taking offense, Victoria seemed intrigued by his candor. "I create jobs and revitalize areas that were crumbling into disuse. But I'm curious, what would you do differently?" Their debates became surprisingly engaging. Jackson found himself challenged and stimulated by her sharp mind, while Victoria seemed genuinely interested in his perspective on community development and preservation. You see things differently, she told him. It's refreshing. Most people in my circle just agree with whatever I say. Jackson couldn't deny that he'd begun looking forward to her visits, even as guilt nagged at him. He'd mentioned her to Lily only in passing, describing Victoria simply as a new client with some classic cars. Meanwhile, the pressure at home intensified. His father's condition deteriorated, requiring more expensive treatments. Michael needed tuition for his final semester, and Devon's college applications were due, along with their associated fees. When Jackson came home one evening to find Michael confronting loan sharks about money their father had apparently borrowed during his ownership of the garage, the weight of their financial precarity became unbearable. "Why didn't anyone tell Faye about this debt?" Jackson demanded after sending the men away with a partial payment, nearly emptying his savings account. "Dad didn't want to worry you," Michael said. "You're already carrying everything." That night, when Victoria called with another proposal, a position as head mechanic for her entire corporate fleet, with a salary that made her previous offer seem modest, Jackson didn't immediately refuse. "I need to think about it," he said. "Of course," Victoria replied, "but I'd like to discuss it further. Perhaps over dinner? Tomorrow evening at the Whitney." The invitation to one of Detroit's most exclusive restaurants should have been easy to decline. Instead, Jackson found himself agreeing. "It's just dinner to discuss a job," he told himself as he borrowed a suit from Marcus and parked his battered pickup several blocks away from the restored mansion that housed the Whitney, not wanting the valet to see it. Victoria was waiting in a private dining room, wearing a deep emerald dress that complemented her eyes. In the soft lighting, away from the garage's fluorescent glare, she was strikingly beautiful in a way that made Jackson acutely aware of his borrowed suit and calloused hands. The meal was exquisite, the wine presumably expensive, though Jackson knew little about either. Victoria guided the conversation skillfully, asking about his dreams for the garage, his brother's aspirations, his father's condition. "Healthcare costs in this country are criminal," she said when he mentioned the mounting medical bills. "No, one should lose everything because someone they love is ill." Jackson found himself opening up more than intended, describing his frustration with insurance companies and his fears for his brother's futures. Only when dessert arrived did Victoria finally steer the conversation to business. "I've revised my offer," she said, sliding a new document across the table. The terms were astounding, a salary beyond anything Jackson could have imagined, comprehensive health insurance that would cover his father's treatments, educational, trusts for his brothers, and a provision to renovate and expand East Side Auto Repair, with Jackson maintaining ownership and decision-making power. "Why would you do all this?" he asked, genuinely confused. Victoria's gaze was direct, unwavering. "Because I value what's rare, Jackson, and integrity combined with exceptional skill is exceedingly rare." She paused. "There's also something else I value, honesty, so let me be honest with you. I find you compelling. Your hands may be stained with grease, but they create and fix with a precision many surgeons would envy. You carry immense responsibility without complaint or compromise." She leaned forward slightly. "I'm not just offering you a job, I'm offering you a partnership. Professional, certainly, but potentially more if you're open to exploring that possibility." Jackson stared at her, stunned by the directness of her proposition. "I'm with someone," he said finally. "Lily, I've mentioned her." "Ah yes, the designer who repurposes old fabrics." Victoria nodded. "Admirable work. But Jackson, be honest with yourself. Can she help you achieve everything you need for your family? For yourself? Some relationships, however comfortable, simply can't withstand the practical pressures of life." Jackson wanted to defend his relationship with Lily, to explain that their connection wasn't about financial security, but something deeper. Yet he found himself speechless, the weight of his family's needs pressing down on him. "You don't need to answer tonight," Victoria said gently. "Take the proposal home, review it carefully, and know that all aspects of it are optional. You can accept the professional opportunity without any personal entanglement." As Jackson drove home, his mind was in turmoil. The practical part of him recognized the lifeline Victoria was offering, a way to ensure his father received proper care, his brothers got their education, and the garage remained viable. But beneath the practical considerations lurked something more complicated. The undeniable spark of attraction he felt toward Victoria, not just for her beauty or wealth, but for her intelligence, determination, and the unexpected moments of genuine understanding she'd shown. When he pulled up to his modest house, the light was on in the living room. Through the window he could see Lily sitting with his father, patiently helping him with his physical therapy exercises, laughing at something he said. The sight caused a painful twist in his chest. Jackson sat in his truck, the elegance of the Whitney still clinging to his borrowed clothes, while the simple, authentic life he'd built waited just steps away. In that moment, suspended between two worlds, Jackson Carter faced the most consequential decision of his life, one that would reshape not just his future, but the lives of everyone he loved. What he couldn't possibly know was that Victoria, Blackwood's interest in him went far deeper than she'd revealed, and the true cost of her generous offer would be paid in currencies far more precious than money. 3 weeks after that fateful dinner, Jackson stood in front of a mirror in a penthouse apartment that overlooked the Detroit River, barely recognizing the man who stared back at him. Gone were the oil-stained work clothes and the perpetual smudge of grease beneath his fingernails. In their place stood a man in a custom-tailored suit, with a designer watch on his wrist, and shoes that cost more than he once made in a month. The transformation had happened with dizzying speed. He'd accepted Victoria's professional offer, telling himself it was solely for his family's benefit. His father was now receiving treatment at the city's premier medical facility. Michael had graduated without debt. Devin was considering universities he'd never dreamed he could afford. The garage had been renovated and expanded, with Marcus promoted to manager and 3 new mechanics hired from the community. Everything Jackson had ever wanted for his family had materialized as if by magic. Everything except his own peace of mind. "You look troubled," Victoria observed, appearing in the doorway in an elegant black dress. They were due at a charity gala in less than an hour, another in the endless parade of social events that now filled Jackson's calendar. "Just thinking about the garage," he lied. In truth, he was thinking about Lily. The memory of their last conversation still burned like acid in his chest. He'd tried to explain Victoria's offer in purely professional terms, emphasizing the benefits for his family. But Lily knew him too. "Well, there's more to this than a job," she'd said, her eyes searching his face. "This woman wants something from you that has nothing to do with your mechanical skills." "It's not like that," he'd insisted, though they both knew he was lying. When Lily had asked directly if he had feelings for Victoria, his hesitation had been answer enough. The hurt in her eyes as she'd removed her hand from his had nearly broken him. She hadn't shouted or made a scene, that wasn't Lily's way. She'd simply gathered her things and left his life with the same quiet dignity with which she'd entered it. He'd tried to call her in the days that followed, but Marcus reported that she'd returned his few possessions from her apartment and asked not to be contacted again. She'd been offered an opportunity with a sustainable fashion collective in Chicago, Marcus said, and had decided to take it. "Jackson?" Victoria's voice pulled him back to the present. "The car is waiting." The charity gala was being held at the Detroit Institute of Arts, its grand marble halls filled with the city's elite. As Victoria's companion, Jackson found himself the object of intense curiosity. He overheard whispers, the handsome mechanic who'd caught the eye of Detroit's most eligible bachelorette, the Cinderella story of the garage owner now moving in, high society. While Victoria networked effortlessly, Jackson struggled to find his footing in conversations about hedge funds and vacation properties. He excused himself and wandered into a quiet gallery, where he found himself standing before a painting of workers in an auto factory, their faces proud and dignified despite their humble circumstances. "Powerful, isn't it?" asked an older man who had approached silently. Jackson nodded. "Reminds me of my father." "Walter Blackwood," the man introduced himself, extending his hand. "Victoria's uncle." Jackson recognized the name, Victoria's father's brother, a board member but not active in the company's operations. Your niece has been very generous. To me and my family, Jackson said. Walter's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Victoria has always been strategic in her generosity. He studied Jackson with interest. You seem different from her usual companions. I'm beginning to realize that myself, Jackson admitted. A word of advice, young man, Walter said, lowering his voice. In our world, nothing is given without expectation of return. Whatever Victoria has invested in you, she believes will yield significant dividends. Before Jackson could respond, Victoria appeared at his side, slipping her arm through his. Her smile was warm, but her eyes flashed a warning toward her uncle. I see you've met Jackson, she said. I hope you're not boring him with company history, Uncle Walter. Not at all, Walter replied smoothly, just discussing art appreciation. As the older man walked away, Victoria tightened her grip on Jackson's arm. Don't let my uncle get in your head. He's bitter about being sidelined in the company. Later that night, in the privacy of the penthouse that had increasingly become their shared space, Victoria opened a bottle of champagne. To new beginnings, she toasted, handing Jackson a flute. I have something to discuss with you. She produced a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a ring, as Jackson had momentarily feared, but a key. I've established a new division of Blackwood Industries focused on automotive preservation and restoration, she announced. I'd like you to lead it. The key is to your new workshop, state-of-the-art equipment, space for 20 restoration projects simultaneously, and a staff of specialists at your disposal. The opportunity was everything Jackson had ever dreamed of professionally, the chance to work on exceptional vehicles with unlimited resources. There's more, Victoria continued. I've registered the business under both our names, equal partners. Jackson nearly choked on his champagne. Victoria, that's too much. I can't accept. You can, and you will, she interrupted, her tone suddenly firm. You've earned my trust. Jackson, in business and personally. Her expression softened as she moved closer. These past weeks have convinced me that what's between us has potential beyond my initial expectations. When she kissed him, Jackson responded with a passion born partly of genuine attraction and partly of gratitude and obligation. Their relationship had evolved into something physical yet still guarded, with Victoria always maintaining a certain emotional distance despite her growing possessiveness. The next morning, Jackson visited his father at the rehabilitation facility. Robert Carter was making remarkable progress under the care of specialists Victoria had arranged. His speech had improved, and he could now walk short distances with assistance. Something's troubling you, son, his father observed, as they sat in the facility's garden. Jackson sighed. I'm supposed to be happier, aren't I? Everything's better now. The medical bills are handled. The boys are set for school. The garage is thriving. But, his father prompted. But I don't recognize my life anymore, Jackson admitted, or myself. Robert. Carter studied his son with eyes that had lost none of their perceptiveness despite his illness. You remind me of men I knew in the service, given medals for actions they weren't proud of. Their faces looked like yours does now. The observation hit Jackson hard. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from Victoria requesting his presence at a board meeting where the new automotive division would be announced. The Blackwood Industries headquarters occupied the top floors of a gleaming downtown skyscraper. Jackson felt out of place despite his expensive suit as he was escorted to the boardroom, where Victoria introduced him to senior executives and board members. Jackson will revitalize our position in the automotive sector, she explained confidently. His expertise is unparalleled. As the meeting progressed, Jackson noticed something odd about the presentation of financial projections. Several substantial assets were listed under Carter Blackwood Holdings, far more than the automotive, restoration business would account for. When he questioned Victoria privately after the meeting, her explanation was vague. They're subsidiary investments, nothing for you to worry about. That night, curiosity got the better of him. While Victoria attended a business dinner without him, Jackson used her laptop, left carelessly open, to investigate the holdings. listed in his name. What he discovered chilled him to the bone. Carter Blackwood Holdings wasn't just an automotive business. It was a complex network of shell companies holding assets from real estate to overseas investments. More disturbingly, many of these companies were engaged in transactions that seemed designed to obscure the movement of funds through various international accounts. Jackson wasn't a financial expert, but he'd grown up in a neighborhood where shell games were common enough to recognize one when he saw it. This had all the hallmarks of sophisticated money laundering and tax evasion, with his name prominently attached to the documentation. When Victoria returned, she found him still, at her computer, his face pale. "What is all this?" he demanded. "Why is my name on these companies?" Victoria calmly set down her purse. "I told you we were partners." "Partners in what exactly? This looks illegal." "Illegal is a harsh word," she replied, her voice steady. "Let's call it creative compliance. Every major corporation operates this way, Jackson. How do you think we fund developments in struggling neighborhoods? The tax burden would make it impossible otherwise. So you're using me as what? A front man? A fall guy if things go wrong?" The betrayal cut deep, made worse by his own complicity. He'd allowed himself to be seduced, not just by Victoria's beauty or wealth, but by the promise of solving all his problems in one fell swoop. Victoria's expression hardened. "Don't be dramatic. Nothing will go wrong as long as you continue playing your role." She approached him, placing her hands on his chest. "I chose you because I trust you, Jackson, and because I want you in my life. Is that so difficult to believe?" "Want my name removed from these companies," he insisted. "Whatever this is, I didn't sign up for it." "Actually, you did." Victoria's smile turned cold as she retrieved a file from her desk. "These are the documents you signed when we established our partnership. If you read the fine print, which you clearly didn't, you'll find that your responsibilities as co-owner are quite extensive." Jackson flipped through the papers, remembering how he'd signed them during a celebratory dinner, trusting Victoria's explanation that they were standard partnership agreements. "I'll go to the authorities," he threatened, though his voice lacked conviction. "With what evidence?" Victoria laughed softly. "Your signature is on everything, Jackson. The accounts are in your name. You've been depositing substantial checks and living quite comfortably from these arrangements." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Think of your father's care, your brother's education, the garage and all those employees who depend on you now." The trap was elegant in its simplicity and completeness. Every gift, every opportunity Victoria had given him now revealed itself as another bar in an invisible cage. "What do you want from me?" Jackson asked, his voice hollow. Victoria cupped his face in her hands. "The same thing I've wanted from the beginning. Your unique skills, your name untainted by any previous financial impropriety, your genuine connection to the community we're developing. And yes, you. Is that so terrible? To be wanted for your many qualities?" When she kissed him, Jackson didn't pull away, but he remained unresponsive, his mind racing with the implications of his situation. He was compromised, implicated in financial schemes. He barely understood, but that could potentially send him to prison, while Victoria, with her army of lawyers and carefully constructed plausible deniability, would likely emerge unscathed. Later, lying awake beside Victoria's sleeping form, Jackson made his decision. He would play along for now, gather information, and find a way out, not just for himself, but for his family, whose security now depended on his ability to extricate them from Victoria Blackwood's web without bringing it all crashing down around them. What Jackson didn't realize was that Victoria had anticipated his discovery and his reaction. The laptop had been left accessible deliberately, the files curated to reveal enough to concern him without exposing the true scale of the operation. His apparent capitulation was exactly what she had expected, another step in a carefully choreographed dance that had begun the moment she'd first driven her Aston Martin into his modest garage. As dawn broke over the Detroit skyline, Jackson, Carter, once defined by his straightforward integrity, found himself becoming something he'd never imagined, a man with secrets, a man with a plan, a man learning to wear a mask as flawlessly tailored as his new suits. 6 months into his entanglement with Victoria Blackwood, Jackson had mastered the art of living a double life. To the outside world, he was the success story everyone loved, the working-class mechanic whose exceptional talent had catapulted him into Detroit's elite circles. In reality, he was gathering evidence, building allies, and searching for a way out of Victoria's intricate trap. The automotive restoration center that bore his name had become his sanctuary. There, surrounded by the honest work of rebuilding classic cars, Jackson could momentarily forget the web of deception that had ensnared him. He'd assembled a team of skilled mechanics who shared his passion and integrity, creating a space that reflected his original vision rather than Victoria's influence. "Mr. Carter, the '67 Shelby is ready for your inspection," called Ryan, a young mechanic Jackson had hired from his old neighborhood, one of several employees he'd brought in from struggling communities, giving them opportunities Victoria hadn't anticipated when funding the center. Jackson ran his hand along the perfectly restored muscle car, feeling a surge of genuine pride. At least this part of his new life was real: the craftsmanship, the preservation of automotive history, the mentoring of young talent. His phone buzzed with a message from Victoria: "Dinner with the mayor tonight. Wear the blue suit." These commands had become routine, part of Victoria's ongoing project to shape him into the partner she wanted, sophisticated enough to accompany her in high society, but still authentic enough to serve as her bridge to the real Detroit she claimed to want to revitalize. "Everything okay, boss?" Ryan asked, noticing Jackson's expression darken. "Fine," Jackson replied automatically, then reconsidered. Ryan was from the same streets as Jackson, and his perception might be valuable. "Actually, have you heard anything?" "About Blackwood Industries' development in Eastern Market?" Ryan hesitated. "Just rumors. Some businesses getting pushed out because they can't afford the new rents. My cousin's bakery got an eviction notice last week. Place has been there for 3 generations. The information confirmed what Jackson had begun to suspect. While Victoria spoke publicly about inclusive development and community preservation, the reality on the ground was different. The neighborhoods being revitalized were systematically excluding the very residents and businesses that had given them character and resilience during Detroit's hardest times. This pattern of displacement connected to the financial irregularities Jackson had been quietly investigating. Using his access to Blackwood Industries systems, granted as part of his partnership status, he discovered that many properties were being acquired through shell companies at below-market rates, often after suspicious patterns of code violations suddenly appeared against previously compliant businesses. The most troubling discovery was a subsidiary called Riverside Holdings that seemed to exist solely to buy properties in areas targeted for revitalization, only to flip them to Blackwood Industries at inflated prices. The artificial markup was then written off through a complex series of transactions that passed through offshore accounts before returning as investment capital for new projects. "I need to understand how deep this goes," Jackson muttered to himself. His chance came unexpectedly when Victoria announced she needed to travel to Singapore for a week of meetings with international investors. For the first time since their partnership began, Jackson would have extended access to Blackwood's operations without Victoria's watchful presence. "I trust you'll manage things here," she said as she packed, her tone making it clear this was both a test and an expectation. "Walter will try to undermine some of our initiatives while I'm gone. Don't let him." Jackson nodded, already planning how to use this opportunity. Safe travels. With Victoria halfway around the world, Jackson implemented the plan he'd been developing for months. His first move was to contact someone he'd been avoiding for too long: Marcus, his old friend, and now manager of Eastside Auto Repair. They met at a diner far from their usual haunts, a place unlikely to be frequented by anyone in Victoria's circle. "You look like hell," Marcus observed bluntly as Jackson slid into the booth. "Expensive hell, but still hell." Jackson managed a tired smile. "That obvious?" "To someone who's known you since we were stealing hubcaps." "Yeah." Marcus studied him. "You haven't been back to the garage in weeks. Your brothers say you're always busy with important meetings. So what's really going on? Over. The next hour, Jackson explained his situation in careful detail. Victoria's financial schemes, his unwitting complicity, and his fear for his family's security if he tried to extricate himself. "Jesus, Jack," Marcus whispered when he finished. "You're in deep." "Deeper than you know," Jackson admitted. "But I need your help. There's someone I need to contact, but I can't do it directly." Marcus's eyebrows rose. "Lily?" Jackson shook his head. "Not yet. I need to talk to Diana Wells." The name clearly surprised Marcus. Diana Wells was a former client of Jackson's, an accountant who specialized in forensic finance and who had recently joined the Michigan Attorney General's Financial Crimes Division. "She came to me last month," Marcus revealed. "Asked about you, said some properties connected to your new partnership were showing up in an investigation." Jackson felt a chill. "What did you tell her?" "That you'd never knowingly do anything illegal. She left her card." Marcus pulled it from his wallet. "Said to call if I heard from you." The following day, Jackson met Diana at a coffee shop near the Federal Building. She was, as he remembered, direct, no nonsense, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I've been hoping you'd reach out," she said after they exchanged brief greetings. "Your name has appeared in some troubling financial patterns, Mr. Carter." "I know," Jackson replied, sliding a flash drive across the table. "That's why I'm here." Diana pocketed the drive. "What am I looking at?" "Everything I've gathered on Blackwood Industries' financial operations for the past 6 months. Shell companies, property acquisitions, offshore transfers. My name is on a lot of it, but I can prove I was deliberately misled." "This is a significant step, Mr. Carter. There will be consequences." Jackson nodded grimly. "I understand, but I need assurances. My family has medical needs, educational commitments." "We protect our whistleblowers," Diana interrupted. "But I can't make promises until I see what you've brought me." Walking away from that meeting, Jackson felt both lighter and more terrified than he had in months. The machinery of justice was now in motion, but so too was the countdown to his inevitable confrontation with Victoria. His next step was to secure his family. Without revealing the full situation, he met with his brothers and explained that they needed to be prepared for potential changes. "I've set up accounts for both of you that Victoria can't access," he told them, handing over documentation. "Dad's medical care is paid through a separate trust now. Whatever happens with me and Victoria, you'll be protected." Michael, now working on his master's degree, studied his brother with concern. "What's really going on?" "Jack, the less you know right now, the better," Jackson replied. "Just trust me." He also visited his father, who seemed to sense the turmoil behind his son's composed exterior. "You're making a stand," Robert observed, his speech still slightly slurred from his stroke, but his mind as sharp as ever. Jackson squeezed his father's hand. "I'm trying to fix a mistake." "Good man," Robert said simply. Meanwhile, Victoria called daily from Singapore, each conversation a careful dance of half-truths. Jackson played his part, discussing business developments, attending board meetings, in her absence, maintaining the illusion that everything was proceeding according to her plans. In reality, he was meticulously documenting every questionable transaction, every shell company, every property deal that showed signs of manipulation or fraud. Diana called twice, requesting additional information and clarification, which Jackson provided while covering his tracks in Blackwood's systems. 4 days into Victoria's absence, Jackson received an unexpected visitor at the Restoration Center. Walter Blackwood appeared just as Jackson was finishing work on a rare Ferrari, his hands deep in the engine compartment. "Impressive," Walter commented, watching Jackson work. "Victoria said you had remarkable skill. It seems she wasn't exaggerating for once." Jackson wiped his hands on a rag. "What can I do for you, Mr. Blackwood?" Walter surveyed the facility with calculating eyes. "I thought we might have a frank conversation, man to man, about my niece and what she's really using you for." Despite his wariness, Jackson was intrigued. "I'm listening." "Victoria didn't choose you just for your mechanical abilities or your handsome face," Walter said bluntly. She selected you because you were perfect for her current strategy, authentic, respected in the community, without financial or legal complications in your background. You're saying she's using me. I'm saying Victoria never does anything without multiple motivations, Walter corrected. She may genuinely be attracted to you, but she also needs someone with clean hands to be the public face of certain investments. Jackson kept his expression neutral. Why are you telling me this? Walter's smile was thin. Let's just say I'm concerned about the direction of the company my brother built. Victoria's methods have become increasingly aggressive. Some board members are concerned. The conversation left Jackson unsettled. Walter clearly had his own agenda, but his warnings aligned with what Jackson had already discovered. More importantly, the meeting confirmed that Victoria's inner circle was not as unified as she portrayed. There were potential allies, or at least others with reasons to oppose her, within Blackwood Industries itself. On the final night before Victoria's return, Jackson received an urgent call from Diana. "We need to move faster than anticipated," she said, her voice tense. "There's been a red flag on some of the accounts you identified. Victoria may have been alerted." Jackson's heart raced. "What do I need to do?" "Get any final documentation you can access, and be prepared for us to move within the next 48 hours. After hanging up, Jackson drove to Blackwood headquarters. Using his security clearance, he entered Victoria's private office and began downloading files from her personal server, the final pieces of evidence he needed to complete the case against her while protecting himself. As the download neared completion, Jackson noticed a folder labeled Carter Project. Curiosity overriding caution, he opened it to find something that made his blood run cold. A complete dossier on himself, his family and Lily, dating back more than a year before Victoria had first appeared at his garage. There were surveillance photos, financial records, even medical information about his father that would have been impossible to obtain legally. Most disturbing was a detailed strategy document outlining how to approach him, gain his trust, and gradually entangle him in Blackwood operations. The revelation was staggering. Nothing about their relationship had been chance. He hadn't been chosen for his skills or even his clean reputation. He had been targeted, studied, and deliberately manipulated from the very beginning. But why? What made Jackson Carter worth such elaborate measures? The answer came in a confidential memo attached to his father's medical records. Subject's father, Robert Carter, was lead plaintiff in the 2008 class action suit against Blackwood Construction. Settlement included NDA regarding defective materials, potential leverage point if reopened. The pieces suddenly aligned with sickening clarity. Victoria's father had been responsible for cutting corners on construction projects that had resulted in injuries, including to workers at sites where Robert Carter had been employed. The lawsuit had been settled quietly, but the evidence hadn't been destroyed. It had merely been buried, potentially still dangerous to Blackwood Industries if ever brought to light again. Jackson was not just a convenient scapegoat. He was insurance against his own father's potential testimony. As this realization dawned, Jackson heard the distinctive sound of high heels on marble. Victoria's voice echoed from the hallway, speaking to security. She had returned from Singapore a day early. Quickly ejecting the drive and pocketing it, Jackson closed the programs he'd been accessing and moved to the sitting area of the office, arranging himself casually as if he'd been waiting for her. When Victoria entered, surprise flashed briefly across her face before being replaced by a practiced smile. "Jackson, this is unexpected." She set down her briefcase, studying him with those penetrating green eyes. "Missing me so much you had to wait in my office?" Jackson forced himself to smile, to play the role he'd perfected over the past months. "Just wanted to surprise you. How was Singapore?" Victoria approached, her perfume enveloping him as she leaned in for a kiss. "Productive. Very productive." She pulled back slightly, her eyes searching his. "And you? Have you been keeping busy?" "In my absence." In that moment, looking into her calculating gaze, Jackson realized she knew, perhaps not everything, but enough to suspect his loyalty had shifted. The game had changed, and the final confrontation was now inevitable. "Just taking care of business," he replied evenly. "There's a lot we should discuss." Victoria's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. "Yes," she agreed, stepping back to pour herself a drink. "I believe there is." As thunder rumbled outside, heralding an approaching storm, Jackson Carter prepared himself for the most dangerous phase of his plan, the direct confrontation with a woman who had built an empire on secrets and who would stop at nothing to protect them. The penthouse windows rattled as the storm intensified over Detroit, sheets of rain cascading down the glass like tears. Inside, the tension between Jackson and Victoria had reached breaking point after 3 days of careful maneuvering, veiled accusations, and increasingly strained pretense. "I think it's time we were honest with each other," Jackson said finally, setting down his untouched scotch on the glass coffee table between them. Victoria's expression revealed nothing as she reclined on the sofa, still dressed in the tailored suit she'd worn to a board meeting earlier that day. "I've always been honest with you, Jackson. Within reason. That's the problem. Your definition of reason includes making me the fall guy for your financial shell games." Jackson met her gaze steadily. "I know everything, Victoria. About the offshore accounts, the property manipulation, the tax evasion. About how you researched me and my family for months before you ever showed up at my garage." A flicker of surprise crossed her face, quickly masked. "Been doing some investigating, have you? How enterprising." She set down her own drink. "And what exactly do you plan to do with this? Information you believe you have." "I already did it," Jackson replied calmly. "The Attorney General's Financial Crimes Division has everything. The investigation is underway." For the first time since he'd known her, Victoria Blackwood appeared genuinely shocked. The perfect composure that was her hallmark faltered momentarily before she regained control. "That was exceptionally stupid," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "Do you understand what you've done? Your name is on those documents. Your signature authorized those transactions. You've implicated yourself in every action you claim to be exposing." "I know the risks," Jackson acknowledged, "but unlike you, I'm willing to accept consequences for my mistakes." Victoria stood in one fluid motion, anger finally breaking through her controlled exterior. "Consequences? You have no idea what real consequences look like, Jackson. What do you think will happen to your family when you're indicted? To your father's care? Your brother's education?" Her laugh was bitter. "And for what? Some misguided moral stand?" "For the truth," Jackson replied, also rising. "For every business owner pushed out of neighborhoods they helped build. For every community broken apart by your revitalization projects. And yes, for my own peace of mind." Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Peace of mind is a luxury you can no longer afford. Perhaps a night in custody will help you reconsider your position." She reached for her phone. "I'm calling my security team. They'll hold you until the police arrive." "That would be unwise," came a voice from the penthouse. Entrance. Both turned to see Diana Wells standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 agents in dark suits. "Ms. Blackwood," Diana said coolly, "I have a warrant to search these premises and to access all Blackwood Industries servers and financial records." Victoria's composure slipped again, genuine alarm flashing across her face before her lawyer's instincts kicked in. "On what grounds?" "Financial fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, and witness tampering, for starters." Diana handed over the document. "Mr. Carter has been cooperating with our investigation." Victoria's gaze snapped to Jackson, fury and betrayal blazing in her eyes. "You were wearing a wire." Jackson shook his head. "Didn't need to. You've been recording everything in this penthouse for months." He gestured to the nearly invisible cameras installed in the light fixtures, devices he'd discovered during his careful examination of the apartment. "Your own surveillance system provided some of our best evidence." The irony was unmistakable. The very tools Victoria had used to control others had become instruments of her undoing. For a tense moment it seemed Victoria might lash out physically. Instead she straightened her spine, the mask of cool authority slipping back into place. "My attorneys will have this thrown out before morning." You've built your case on illegally obtained evidence and the testimony of a disgruntled lover. Diana smiled thinly. Actually, our case began with financial irregularities flagged by regulatory algorithms. Mr. Carter's evidence merely confirmed what we already suspected and helped us identify additional co-conspirators. She nodded to the agents, who began documenting and securing the premises. You're welcome to call your attorneys. In fact, I recommend it. As Victoria was escorted to the kitchen to make her calls under supervision, Diana turned to Jackson. You should prepare yourself. The next few weeks won't be easy. There will be depositions, possibly testimony. I understand, Jackson said. What about my family's protection? As discussed, your cooperation has been noted, and the evidence you provided clearly shows you were deliberately misled about the nature of the businesses you were signing for. Diana's expression softened slightly. It's not immunity, but it's significant mitigation. Your family's medical and educational arrangements will be protected from seizure. When Victoria emerged from the kitchen, she was once again the picture. Self-controlled poise, though her eyes burned with cold fury when they landed on Jackson. This isn't over, she said quietly as she gathered her purse and phone. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Jackson met her gaze. That's where you're wrong. I know exactly who you are now, and more importantly, so will everyone else. As Victoria was escorted from the penthouse, the storm outside began to subside, the rain softening to a gentle patter against the windows. Jackson stood alone in the luxurious space that had never felt like home, surrounded by the trappings of a life that had nearly cost him his soul. The following weeks unfolded in a blur of legal proceedings, media scrutiny, and profound personal reckoning. As Diana had predicted, Victoria's legal team fought vigorously, but the evidence was overwhelming. Multiple Blackwood executives turned state's witness, revealing that Victoria's schemes extended far beyond what Jackson had initially discovered. Walter Blackwood, seizing the opportunity, led a board rebellion that removed Victoria from leadership, pending the outcome of the investigation. In a private meeting with Jackson, the older man was surprisingly candid. I didn't expect you to have the courage to take her on, he admitted. Most men in your position would have kept enjoying the benefits while looking the other way. I'm not most men, Jackson replied simply. With the immediate legal danger receding, Jackson turned his attention to rebuilding. He started by returning to East Side Auto Repair, where Marcus welcomed him with a mixture of relief and lingering concern. You could have told me how deep you were, Marcus chided, as they inspected the expanded facility Victoria's money had built. I would have helped sooner. I needed to protect you and everyone else, Jackson explained. Besides, I wasn't sure who I could trust. The garage was thriving under Marcus's management, serving its original community while also attracting clients from across the city, drawn by its growing reputation for honesty and exceptional work. Jackson found comfort in the familiar smells of oil and metal, the straightforward problems that could be solved with skill and patience. But someone, was still missing. Have you called her? Marcus asked one evening as they closed. Up shop. Jackson didn't pretend to misunderstand. No, after everything that's happened, what would I even say? The truth might be a good start. Finding Lily proved more challenging than expected. The Sustainable Fashion Collective in Chicago had been a temporary position. She had moved on months ago. Through mutual acquaintances, Jackson eventually learned she had returned to Detroit, establishing her own small design studio in Corktown, not far from where they had once imagined building their shared future. Standing outside the converted warehouse that now housed reclaimed designs by Lily Chen, Jackson hesitated. The windows displayed elegant garments crafted from repurposed materials, each piece reflecting Lily's unique vision of beauty, created from what others had discarded. Before he could gather his courage to enter, the door opened, and Lily herself appeared, stopping short when she saw him. Time had changed her subtly. Her hair was shorter, her posture more confident, her eyes wiser, but no less kind. She wore one of her own designs, a structured jacket made from vintage denim transformed into something both practical and beautiful. Jackson, she said simply, neither welcoming nor dismissing. Lily. his carefully prepared speech deserted him. Your designs look amazing. A small, cautious smile. Thank you. Business is good. I have a contract with 3 local boutiques, and I'm developing a line of workshop programs to teach sustainable fashion techniques. That's wonderful. You always deserved success. An awkward silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words. I saw you on the news, Lily finally said. About Blackwood Industries. That took courage. Jackson shook his head. Not as much as it would have taken to be honest with you from the beginning. To choose what was right instead of what seemed easy. He met her gaze directly. I'm sorry, Lily, for everything. Her expression softened slightly. I know. Marcus kept me updated on what was happening. It sounded complicated. It was. But that's no excuse for how I treated you. Jackson took a deep breath. I don't expect forgiveness or a second chance. I just wanted you to know that I regret hurting you more than anything else in my life. Lily studied him for a long moment. Would you like to come in? I just made tea. The studio was beautiful, open, and airy, with workstations where 2 young apprentices were carefully disassembling vintage garments for materials. Sketches and fabric swatches covered pinboards along one wall, while completed pieces hung on display racks against another. Every detail reflected Lily's aesthetic of finding beauty in the overlooked and discarded. In her small office over steaming cups of jasmine tea, they began the delicate process of honest conversation. Jackson shared the full story, Victoria's manipulation, his growing entanglement, and the difficult path to exposing the truth. Lily listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful. What will you do now? She asked when he finished. I'm rebuilding, Jackson replied. The Restoration Center is being restructured as a non-profit training program for automotive skills. Most of the assets I received through the partnership are being held in trust pending the final legal resolution, but I've been allowed to designate educational and community purposes for them. And personally, Jackson set down his cup. Personally, I'm trying to rediscover who I am without all the complications, to find my way back to the values I compromised. He hesitated. I miss the simplicity of who we were together, Lily. The honesty of it, but I understand that's gone now. Lily's eyes showed a mixture of warmth and caution. Not gone, Jackson. Changed. We've both changed. You've seen the darkest side of wealth and power. I've built something on my own that I'm proud of. She reached across the table, not quite touching his hand, but close. I'm not sure what that means for us, if anything, but I'm willing to find out slowly. The tentative reconciliation was interrupted by the arrival of a delivery, fabric samples Lily had been waiting for. As she signed for the package, Jackson noticed a small photograph on her desk, Lily with her parents at the opening of her studio, all of them beaming with pride. Your parents must be thrilled about your success, Jackson commented when she returned. Lily smiled. They are. Dad still doesn't quite understand fashion, but he knows I'm happy. That's enough for him. She paused. How's your father doing? Better. The treatments have really helped. He's even talking about volunteering at the training center, teaching the theory component since his hands aren't steady enough for practical work anymore. Their conversation continued, cautious but increasingly warm, finding their way back to the easy understanding that had once defined their relationship. No promises were made, no dramatic declarations offered. Just 2 people who had once loved deeply, finding a path toward possible renewal. As Jackson finally prepared to leave, Lily walked him to the door. I'm designing a special collection for the Detroit Revival Festival next month, she said. Sustainable fashion inspired by the city's automotive heritage. You might have some insights to contribute if you're interested. Jackson recognized the invitation for what it was, not a return to what they had been, but a chance to build something new based on who they had become. I'd like that very much. Outside, the Detroit sky had cleared, revealing stars rarely visible through the city's usual haze. Jackson stood for a moment, looking up at the vastness above, feeling smaller, but somehow more centered than he had in months. His phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Board approved the training program funding. We start interviews next week. Jackson smiled, typing a quick reply, before pocketing his phone and walking toward his truck, the same reliable vehicle he'd driven before Victoria Blackwood had entered his life. He had come full circle in some ways, but the journey had transformed him. The young mechanic who had once dreamed only of expanding his family garage and maybe opening a boutique with the woman he loved had become something more complex. A man who had fallen, learned painful truths about himself and the world, and found the courage to stand for what mattered most. As he drove through the streets of his hometown, past neighborhoods struggling with change, past new developments rising from abandoned lots, past the persistent contrasts of wealth and poverty, Jackson Carter understood something fundamental. True worth wasn't measured in bank accounts or social status, but in the courage to face one's mistakes and the determination to make things right. The road ahead would not be easy. The legal aftermath of Victoria's schemes would continue to unravel for months, perhaps years. The communities affected by Blackwood Industries' practices would need advocates to ensure genuine revitalization rather than mere displacement. And his relationship with Lily, if it could be rebuilt at all, would require patience, honesty, and the humble recognition that some damages can never be fully repaired, only acknowledged and transcended through better choices going forward. Yet for the first time since that fateful day, when a midnight blue Aston Martin had pulled into his garage, Jackson felt genuinely hopeful. He had rediscovered something precious, the quiet dignity that came from living in alignment with his deepest values, regardless of external circumstances. Victoria Blackwood had offered him a world of luxury and influence at the cost of his integrity. In rejecting that bargain, however belatedly, he had found something far more valuable, the freedom to look at himself in the mirror each morning and recognize the man staring back. As Detroit continued its complex dance of decay and renewal around him, Jackson Carter drove toward home, no longer the mechanic who married a millionaire, but simply a man who had fallen, learned, and found the courage to rise again, not in wealth, but in purpose. Femme de Historia. Dear listeners, we hope Jackson and Lily's journey of integrity, loss, and redemption has touched your hearts. For more emotionally charged stories that explore life's complex moral challenges, we've created a special playlist, filled with tales that will make you think, feel, and perhaps see your own life's challenges in a new light. Find it by clicking the link on your left. If you've enjoyed this story of a man who refused to compromise his values despite incredible temptation, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique narratives that dive deep into the human experience, exploring how ordinary people face extraordinary circumstances. Don't miss our upcoming content. We have many more compelling stories waiting for you. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Jackson's position? What other stories of moral courage would you like to hear? Your engagement helps our community grow, and we read every comment with appreciation.